This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Cybersecurity Awareness Month is still going strong, and LifeLock is here with a message about phishing, the scam cybercriminals use to trick victims into allowing access to their devices so they can steal their personal info. Being aware of phishing scams is one way to help protect yourself. For comprehensive identity theft protection, there's LifeLock. Start protecting your identity today with a 30-day free trial at LifeLock.com/podcast.
Want a website with unmatched power, speed, and control? Try Bluehost Cloud, the new web hosting plan from Bluehost, built for WordPress creators by WordPress experts. With 100% uptime, incredible load times, and 24/7 WordPress priority support, your sites will be lightning fast with global reach. And with Bluehost Cloud, your sites can handle surges in traffic no matter how big. Plus, you automatically get daily backups and world-class security. Get started now at Bluehost.com.
Today on CityCast Denver, running a business on Colfax can be tough. But is the Strip's rough and tumble reputation the real reason Natural Grocers is closing its Capitol Hill store? Producer Paul Caroli and I dig into the latest data on Colfax crime and how much perception plays into the reality. Plus, employee ownership is all the rage in Colorado and a hot topic in our local election. But what does it mean when the employees aren't even aware they're becoming owners? Today is Wednesday, October 16th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Bree. Good morning.
Good morning. So we're saying good morning to our listeners. Some of you all are new.
Old and new.
Hi, old and new listeners. Before we get into the show, we want to talk a little bit about what we do here at CityCast Denver and why we do it. If you listen, or if you're just a new listener, you'll find that we talk about what's going on in Denver all the time. News, politics, art. Last week we talked about social media uproar around
Instagram scandals.
Yeah, things that we find interesting that we think that you'll find interesting too. And Paul, can we talk a little bit about I just want to pull back the curtain. How do we decide what we want to talk about on any given day?
I think it might just sound like we are talking about what's going on, or that we're somehow in the middle of all of these different things every day. I don't know. I don't know what people think about it, but it takes a lot of work.
It's a lot.
I mean, it's constantly reading the news, keeping up with all the great work our fellow journalists do around the city.
And we read every publication and media outlet related to Denver every day. All of us do on the team, so we can talk about it.
But it's also talking to real people, yes. Newsmakers, people on the inside of these stories, learning new things, finding things other people are missing, and trying as hard as we can to bring you the real truth and fresh perspectives and honestly great recommendations for what to do and what to eat and where to go, and because we don't want to waste your time.
Yeah, and we also want, it's like we're kind of doing a little bit, I hope that we're doing a little bit of the work for you. Like you said, Paul, our fellow journalists and colleagues across the state are doing the reporting. We might find a voice in there that we want to hear more from. So we go and we try to find that person, or we find the person who points us to another person. And that's really honestly, that's one of the most fun parts about this job. But I also hope that it comes across to our listeners that we're just trying to dig in and learn more so that you can learn more.
And we do it because we care, because we love the city just as much as you do. And with our fall campaign happening this week, I think it's a great time to remind people why we do it and how we do it. And our work, it wouldn't be possible without member support.
We need you. So this is our pitch. This is our ploy. This week, we are trying to get as many new members, CityCast Denver members, as we can. So you can go right now to membership.citycast.fm and sign up to be a member today. That means you're supporting Paul and I and Olivia and Peyton and Adrian and Lizzie and all of these folks that are part of the CityCast network, make this show and make our newsletter, Hey Denver. So again, you can go to membership.citycast.fm. Sign up today to be a member. If you're already a member, we're so grateful. But you can help us make this work happen every single day.
So if you've ever felt like you've gotten something valuable from CityCast Denver or Hey Denver, whether it's a new perspective on a local issue or a great weekend recommendation, please consider becoming a member today. Your support is what keeps us going, and it's what's going to keep keeping us going. And it means the world to us.
So thanks. Let's get into the episode.
All right, let's do it. We got great topics today.
Oh, man. Great. I have a lot of feelings about this first topic.
Let's start at Colfax, a street we both love, a very important street, and a street going through an important transition. I mean, it was just like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, the construction started on the new bus rapid transit line, and now we've got this interesting debate over crime happening because the Natural Grocers that's right by the Argonaut and the Slice Works on that strip, just across from Champagne Tiger, that new bar we've both been to.
Oh, so beautiful.
That's definitely going to be a part of this conversation. The Natural Grocers is closing.
Yeah, at the end of the month.
And the owners say theft and safety issues are to blame.
Yeah. And I have to say, why I really wanted to talk about this was a couple of weeks ago. This was my fail, right? On our Friday show, I said, a 17-year veteran of retail, sometimes struggles with the reasons that stores say they're closing. And I felt it was a fail because my perception was, is this really because of crime and safety, or is it a low-performing store? Is the store blaming it on the community, essentially, that they're closing? And there was new data that some folks in the media dug up. Their stories we'll share from Denverite and Denver Business Journal, looking into what actually is happening.
So what actually is happening?
Well, this was the interesting part to me, Paul, was in Denverite, they reported in 2024, DPD, Denver Police Department, received 78 calls to Natural Grocers on Colfax compared to just 15 calls in 2023.
I mean, can we stop there? That's a big jump.
Huge.
That feels like a lot.
It's huge.
And that's not like the pandemic. That's like between 2023, 2024. What's happening there?
And that's what I think is still nebulous. What is happening there in that particular area? There have been conversations in each of the pieces that were written about the activity around this particular Natural Grocers along Ogden. I know we've seen some stories about that part. We've seen our friend Frank Logantorre at the Colfax Avenue Business Improvement District discuss some of these particular issues, particularly related to like drug use. And that's kind of what this came down to that I thought was interesting was so Denverite reported half the calls on the block that Natural Grocers is on were related to drug and alcohol issues with no significant rise in violent crimes. But then Business Den said 9 News and Denverite previously reported on the crime happening at Natural Grocers, published stories referencing this 78 police response calls in 2024. That figure only includes citizen-initiated calls made to 911 or the Denver Police non-emergency line. There was an additional 35 calls in the data that Business Den found, which brought the total calls to 113. Which is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot. This does square with my experience of the street. Because I was talking to a colleague from another publication at the Champagne Tiger press preview. This was probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I just walking up to Champagne Tiger in the old Tom's Diner building, which is on that same street, it's noticeable. I mean, there's a lot of unhoused people sitting on the street, lying on the street, people sleeping, people having a hard time, going through a tough time. I don't remember it being like that even a year ago.
Really?
Yeah. And I was talking to this colleague and they were saying they lived in the area and they told me that only in the last 6 months, 8 months or so had this big influx of people come and started hanging out there. And he was speculating that it was because some more sweeps had been happening downtown and that folks had been, swept along to this particular strip.
That was kind of my assumption as well. And I don't know if there is a way to track that. Like we can't track where people go after they've been swept. But my perception of that situation is Colfax is a little bit more amenable to folks in a crisis situation. Maybe it's like, it's not like it's expected on Colfax, but it's going to be something that's more tolerated maybe than another part of the city.
I wonder why. I wonder why it feels more comfortable. I mean, it's got nice wide sidewalks. It's got a lot of alleys.
I mean, I also think it's just kind of par for the course where it's a Colfax being Colfax. So it's doesn't mean it's less bothersome to people. I don't know. It kind of gets at this problem about perception. And what I found interesting in these stories was these quotes from Jeff Robinson, who's the property owner. His family owns Argonaut Liquors on the same property. They own that whole area. And his kind of take was, we've been here for over 50 years. And he's like, our approach to theft in the building, in the Argonaut building, is they actually try to deter it. They try to intervene. They encourage their employees to intervene in theft situations. Natural Grocers does not. Their employees, if they see it happening, they just let it happen, which is honestly, from a former retailer, like a retail worker perspective, that's what we were always taught too, was kind of keep yourself safe and not intervene. But he was just kind of saying, it seems like maybe Natural Grocers just was not equipped for what Colfax is like. And I don't know. I'm not sure. It sounds like the theft is a real problem. It sounds like the safety concerns are legitimate. There's a lot about perception. Again, people not feeling safe. So why would they go to that store if they don't feel safe there? And something else I found interesting was this is the only Natural Grocery store closing. So to me, it kind of points to the fact that I was wrong. I think this truly is a problem with this particular store. It's not just that they were maybe low performing or, the store was the company was looking at who was doing the best in the company. It's like genuinely they were having issues there.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure these issues were causing all those other problems too. Like, I'm sure it wasn't performing great because their employees were constantly having to deal with crime and
people
and
not wanting to come in.
I mean, and also the brand of Natural Grocers. I mean, I remember when I used to live over there, like this is a place where I would go for like, I don't know, incense or like fancy soaps. Like this particular business, I feel like especially would be affected by this. Whereas like Argonaut, maybe not as much. I'd be fine going into Argonaut for like, 5 minutes, pick up a 6-pack or whatever. But
different
Natural
vibes.
Grocers, I don't want to go and like drop big bucks and then be walking around with all these like bougie, whatever. I don't even know what to call it. Wellness goods.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of what they sell. Also, I think that they're a little bit pricier than a King Soopers. But I would say that I think people in the neighborhood would also say, this is my grocery option.
Yeah.
This is, especially if I live in Capitol Hill and I don't have a car, this is where I go. So this is my only grocery option.
Well, they got the Queen Soopers. They got the Safeway up in 5 Points. I mean, maybe it's a little bit further. It depends on where you live. I know that neighborhood really well. I used to live like right there. And Natural Grocers was like a once every 3 to 4 months stop in for a specialty item. Like King Soopers was my go-to day to day.
Yeah.
I use that Office Depot a lot. That place is closing too. Did you see that?
I did. And that's kind of been part of this conversation too, is and I think Frank talks about this in one of the articles, is like we need more businesses to be open to increase foot traffic, and perceptions really change when more stores are closed or places are vacant. It doesn't send a good message.
No, I mean, that brings me back to Champagne Tiger too. It's like, this must be so disappointing to see these businesses close for that new owner of this business. Like he's starting a restaurant. He wants it to be like a fancy nightlife spot. And now all these other places that would have been like attractive, bringing foot traffic or
have
not
lighting
around.
and people
lighting
and activity, all the things that make a city safer, right? Is people around.
Combined with the construction costs or the construction, like
BRT,
the hassle of the bus rapid transit that's coming in.
Yeah. I don't know. And I would say
I'm pulling for those guys at Champagne Tiger. They gave themselves a really tough assignment opening before this construction project.
Well, and that's what some of the businesses that are, I think it was a quote from the guy that owned Enzo's Ends, which closed this year, the pizza place next to PS Lounge. He said,
right,
we were already struggling. We saw BRT on its way. We know what construction in the temporary does. We just decided to get out of there. I also would just be bummed that we're going to have this giant empty building. So there's 4 years left on the lease.
What could they do?
It kind of depends on what Natural Grocers wants to do. Can they find a sublease? Or if not, they just pay that 4 years and it sits empty. Ugh. Which to me as a neighbor would be the worst case scenario.
That's not great. Not great.
The mayor's office says that the DPD District 6 team conducted a safety assessment of the property and worked closely with store management to improve safety and crime prevention, including encouraging them to sign a no trespass agreement, improving lighting around the store, addressing environmental design concerns to improve visibility and reduce opportunity for trespassing and criminal activity. And they also increased patrols. They say that they had increased police patrols, but Jeff Robinson, who owns the property, says that he's actually had less luck getting DPD response times.
I've heard that from businesses on Colfax for a long time, that they're struggling to get cops to show up when they call 911.
So
we know the police are understaffed, and this is the kind of thing that gets missed.
There's a lot. There's just so many factors here. It just shows you there's a much more complex situation behind a business closing than can seem at first glance.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Cybersecurity Awareness Month is still going strong. And LifeLock is here with a message about phishing, the scam cybercriminals use to trick victims into allowing access to their devices so they can steal their personal info. Being aware of phishing scams is one way to help protect yourself. For comprehensive identity theft protection, there's LifeLock. Start protecting your identity today with a 30-day free trial at lifelock.com/podcast.
Want a website with unmatched power, speed, and control? Try Bluehost Cloud, the new web hosting plan from Bluehost, built for WordPress creators by WordPress experts. With 100% uptime, incredible load times, and 24/7 WordPress priority support, your sites will be lightning fast with global reach. And with Bluehost Cloud, your sites can handle surges in traffic no matter how big. Plus, you automatically get daily backups and world-class security. Get started now at Bluehost.com.
Well, let's move on. Next topic. Employee ownership. This is big.
Yeah.
I feel like this is big and kind of vague, and that's why I want to talk about it. But we're in the middle of, obviously, campaign season, and I got this postcard in the mail. The Denver slaughterhouse ban is unfair and wrong, which we have talked about the slaughterhouse ban. That's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is, Paul, this was a handwritten flyer I got,
which is that's another topic, but I got one of these from the Harris campaign too that was handwritten. And there was like stickers on it and stamps on it. I had not gotten this before, but the fact that you got one too is like,
it's interesting. It's a real handwritten note from someone, not one of those ones that looks like a handwritten note.
Yeah.
But it said, please vote no on the slaughterhouse ban. I am an employee owner, and if it passes, I will lose my job and benefits. That is unfair. Thank you, Gustavo Fernandez. Okay, beyond it being handwritten, what struck me, Paul, was he said he's an employee owner.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? That is such a good question. That's and it's becoming more popular here in Colorado, this whole employee ownership thing. And I think, for some people, if you work at a business that has something like this, or you have a program like this, you probably know it very intimately. It functions just the way like any other benefit at your job would. But if you're not familiar, I think this can be super ambiguous, and it's because there's so many different types of employee ownership.
Right. That's what I didn't understand was like, what does it mean to be employee owned? What does it mean for this particular guy in this particular job? Or how does that differ from elsewhere?
Well, I think the big thing people should probably know is that this is huge in Colorado. And it's because our governor, Jared Polis, he loves this idea. He loves the idea that workers could have a stake in the businesses that they work for.
And he's a big business guy already. We know this. We know he's very keen on local.
Famously, he has a libertarian streak.
Yes, that's probably the actual way to put it.
Yeah, I think you could chalk this one up to that as well. But he's been big on this for a few years. It's like a 20-year-old trend. Some business owners got together and started thinking like, what could Colorado do better? And now, according to what is it? The National Center for Employee Ownership, they say, quote, hands down, Colorado has become the most employee ownership friendly state in the country. Thanks to Polis and his allies in the legislature.
Really?
Yeah.
Colorado.
Yeah, I know, right? Thanks to Polis and, like I was saying, his allies in the legislature, we have consistently over the past 4 or 5 years increased the money and the support for businesses that want to make a transition to employee ownership. So there, you can get tax credits, you can get like expert support, advice consulting from this Colorado Employee Ownership Office that Polis set up. So it's a big deal. There's like 200 employee-owned businesses in Colorado now. They're helping like 11 to 15 per year probably. And each of these businesses, you get like $50,000 depending on the type of transition you're making. There's a lot of money out there available to help because they really want this. They believe this is a future of business in the state.
This is interesting. So there's a couple of these businesses that have been in the news lately that have claimed this model.
Yeah, and this is where it gets interesting because there's different models, like I said, and some things work really well for some people and not so well for other people. And also this gets misinterpreted because there's so many different types. There's the ESOP, the employee stock ownership plan. That counts as employee ownership. There's an employee ownership trust. There's employee co-ops, like a worker cooperative, where workers actually do make decisions as a group for the shape and future of the business that they collectively own. Like, I think maybe your mind might go there if you hear employee ownership. You might go to that trust model or the co-op co-op model.
That's what I thought was like, oh, this means
Yeah.
employees have a say in how the business runs. But
Yeah.
that's not always the case.
Well, that's the case for something like Fancy Tiger Crafts,
which is closing.
unfortunately closing at the end of the month.
Heartbreaking.
I mean, that shows you it's not a cure-all. You know, a transition like this. The owners, Jamie Jennings and Amber Corcoran, they started talking about a transition in 2016. They worked with the Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership Center. They talked to their longtime employees about taking over, basically buying the business from them and becoming a co-op. But as we see now, it didn't fix all the problems. It's still a business at the end of the day.
Yeah, and this is a bummer because they just moved down to Inglewood, I think, for more affordable rent. And actually, my friend Rachel's a big knitter, and she just posted this really beautiful, sad piece about how much the space mean to her closing. And I'm thinking about how the employees must feel too, who took this on. And
I mean, it must be devastating.
it's so hard.
I mean, to have gone through all
hard.
this work to put so much of your own personal equity into it. And now for the business not have weathered these difficult times we've had, and
I can't imagine what this is like. I've never owned a business. I've been a freelancer, but I've worked for small businesses. I've worked for people who I knew the people who signed my paychecks, and it just feels different than when you work for a corporation. And I imagine if you're an employee owner, it's an even different story.
Yeah.
Well, okay. What about Superior Farms? So
yes,
that's the
Gustavo
one in question.
Fernandez,
Yes.
who wrote you a nice little note here, who identifies as an employee owner. This is such an interesting one because, as we've talked about on the show, the owners of this plant up in Globeville, Superior Farms, this lamb slaughterhouse, the campaigners who are trying to block the ban, they're all like, look at these jobs, look at these workers, they're employee owners. How can we take these jobs away? Who could vote for a ban when it would hurt an employee-owned business? So in this case, what employee ownership means is the ESOP, the Employee Stock Ownership Plan. So this is not... These workers, this Gustavo, he's not in a co-op. He's not helping make decisions for the future of Superior Farms. An ESOP is really more like a retirement plan. And the way it works at Superior Farms, I asked the owners when I was there on my tour, is if you work at Superior Farms for either 1,000 hours or 3 years, you become an employee owner. And then you get annual stock dividends. You get this bonus. So because it functions as a retirement plan, you can cash out when you retire, and this is money that you have, and the value grows or shrinks depending on the strength or weakness of the company itself.
To me, this feels a little bit like not a misnomer, maybe to go that far, but I worked at an Apple retail store, and I got Apple stock as part of my job, but it wasn't presented to me as employee ownership. That's interesting.
Yeah, I feel like if this is a spectrum, this is maybe closer to a regular job.
Just stock
kind
options.
of.
Okay.
Yeah. And also 3 years or 1,000 hours, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
And it's a
long
business
time.
like the slaughterhouse, where they have so much turnover.
Because it's an intense job.
They refuse to tell me exactly what the turnover rate is, likely because it is so high
bad.
it would scare voters into voting to shut them down.
Yeah.
But the turnover is so high, most people who get a job there are
gonna
never
last
going to
that
qualify for this ESOP.
Yeah, that's another part of the consideration of this whole conversation is what kind of work are you doing?
Yeah, what kind of work is it? What kind of jobs are? And then our last case study, my favorite, is another really excellent perspective on this,
which is Bojo's.
Bojo's Pizza.
And also, I feel like we'll talk more about what employee ownership means for Bojo's, but I feel like this was a grand announcement.
Oh my God. I was on vacation this week that this dropped, but if I was there, I would have been the lone voice cautioning restraint from the overwhelming adulation and credit that owner Chip Bear was getting from the likes of Governor Jared Polis, who deemed April 1st, 2023 Bojo's Day in Colorado. Joe Neguse, congressman for that area, he was at their big party where Chip Bear announced this, and he was like, Chip Bear's generosity is legendary. This is from the Colorado Sun piece about this. Neguse called Bojo's a Colorado institution, which I think it is, but Bear's generosity is legendary.
Yeah.
That's questionable. What I noticed in the story that our friend Jason Blevins wrote, and which set off this whole celebration of Bojo's selling his company Chip Bear selling his company to his employees, was that none of the employees were quoted.
Oh.
No employees said a word about this and all the coverage about this. And I thought at the time, did they know that they were buying this company?
Because you would assume if it was becoming,
because
they were making this announcement that they had a say in it.
Years-long process. Fancy Tiger took them like 5 years to figure out how to do this. So I checked in with Bojo's last week. It's been a little over a year since this big announcement. And I was like, hey, how's it going? What's up? Is the employee ownership transition in place? What model did you all go with? And I learned, as I was not surprised to learn at all, that announcement that Chip Bear made on the 50th anniversary party was a surprise to everybody. He just decided he wanted to announce this. The employees had no idea this was coming. They didn't understand what it meant.
This feels like the opposite of the vibe I would be getting about the conversation around employee ownership was surprising your employees.
Yeah, but from all my reporting on Bojo's, this is par for the course for the Bear family.
We need to put some links in the show notes for folks who maybe haven't heard those episodes to give a little context to your shade, Paul.
Anyway, so what I learned, I talked to Cody Bear, who's the new president of Bojo's, Chip's daughter, and she told me that when you do an ESOP, which is the model that they actually started pursuing after the announcement, the company gets sold into this ESOP thing, and then there's a trustee appointed who's in charge of the funds and the stocks that would be distributed to whichever employees would qualify. This is like a million hard decisions that Bojo's was going to have to make after this announcement. So then this trustee is responsible for representing the employee, and that's when the employees learned what the offer was and what this meant, and they, turns out, weren't all psyched about it. And the employee ownership transition at Bojo's is, I'm sad to report, on hold indefinitely.
Maybe because the employees didn't know about it.
Because they didn't know about it.
Real keen on what they were being offered.
Yep.
Because I think that's the other thing is it's not everyone's dream to be an employee owner, I think. And what that actually entails.
Yeah.
We don't know. Obviously, if no one talked to any employees, then how would we know? But I'm just thinking about even just like when we work for someone, sometimes we work for someone so they can do that stuff, and we just come to work and we do our jobs and we get paid and maybe whatever other benefits. But maybe you don't want to be a business owner.
Yeah, maybe you don't want to have a lifelong relationship with Bojo's. Maybe you don't want to have your future financial security staked
wrapped up in
a
Colorado
pizza company
place
that has, stooped to trademarking the term Colorado pizza.
Paul, was this
Colorado-style pizza
reported anywhere? Or did you just snoop around and find out?
All me. This is a scoop. Scoop for CityCast Denver listeners. Sorry, everybody was excited about this announcement last year. Didn't end up going anywhere.
I mean, these are the kind of announcements, though, that get me excited as somebody who, worked in retail for so long. I see that kind of headline and I go, oh, cool, great. I want to support Bojo's. But It's just not that simple.
Not in this case.
Interesting. Well, we'll be watching this more because, Bojo's obviously, Paul's on Bojo Watch 24/7, but Superior Farms is going to be in the news as we go through this campaign, and we'll find out maybe more of how that plays out.
Absolutely.
Should be interesting. Well, Paul, this was fun, but before we go, just one more reminder, our fall campaign is underway. You can become a member of CityCast Denver today. Get all these good feelings and some great perks. Go to membership.citycast.fm right now to join. If you're already a member, we thank you so much because we couldn't do this work without you. Thanks, Paul.
See you next time, Bree.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell Argonaut Liquor and Wine President Josh Robinson about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See ya! It's funny. I the picture I have of me in that costume is we're at Glob actually, and I'm flanked by my brother who's dressed like Max from Where the Wild Things Are, and my sister who's dressed like Sailor Moon, and then I'm in the middle, Virgin Mary, all bloody. It's great.